EOS/US dollar. First off, read this disclaimer carefully. In this video, we will look at the crypto market. Let's quickly look at some, basics of what's going on in the market. Interesting things happening here with zeitgeists and the different sectors in terms of who is leading and lagging. Especially when it comes to sectors, think a lot about the probability of sector rotation. That's a common theme. Okay, let's get into EOS. Let's quickly just look at the website. This is EOS.io. So features: flexible, built for public or private blockchain networks, customizable to suit your business needs, scalable, secure processing designed for mass adoption with industry-leading transaction speeds, user-friendly, developer and consumer-friendly design built for practical, real-world use cases. Here we have starting guides, the hackathon, some recent news. So all in all, this is an interesting cryptocurrency. If we quickly look here at the seasonality, the problem here is that we do not have many years. Hence, we need to take the seasonality here with a lot of grain of salt here. But you can see that historically August and September tend to be rather weak months. Not sure why, but based on the history it has been. But we do not have that much history. Let's look here at the weekly data points, the EOS index here from investing.com. So basically, when it moves up, it means that EOS is strengthening vis-a-vis the US dollar, and the opposite is when it goes down. The interesting thing about EOS is that it tends to move in these cycles. So this cycle and this cycle, they are extremely similar. And then when there's a cycle change, you can see that the news cycle tries also to repeat. But that's an interesting observation. Another thing to observe here is that you have essentially kind of a double bottom. You have the low here and then the low here. The closing low here was higher than here. That's a good sign, though the intra-week low was actually deeper than back here. Hence, you have a conflicted message here as far as double bottoms go. And that also has impacted the rally here from the low, in that we are struggling to break out above this resistance level. This is a very key resistance level. If we were able to close above it, that would be, a very interesting sign here for EOS. We see that there is an improvement here in the data. So the bulls are rallying. We also here have the battle with the 100-week moving average in blue on the horizon. But all in all, the benefit here with EOS is that it has seen a major pullback. It's one of the lagging cryptocurrencies. We've seen massive rallies in some of the other ones. It could be that we will see some rotation out of the hyper overbought cryptos into EOS to have some participation. From the laggards. That's a common thing we see. That could drive it upwards. Yeah. But from a technical perspective here on the weeklies, it's a bit of a kind of a wait and see situation. You could, of course, if I were forced to make a decision here with EOS, I would probably be bullish. Long term, certainly long term, I would have it as a highly speculative bullish position. But yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing about any kind of buying or selling of a security, is that the best time to buy is when things are not really clearly bullish. The best time to sell is when things are not really clearly bearish. Because if you look at here, this right here, it looks very bearish for EOS. Hence, from a technical perspective, like, you have a good reason to go short. But obviously, the best time to actually go short EOS was back here when things were looking super bullish. So that's the tricky thing about market timing. You need to have that contrarian perspective to see those big gains. Okay, the accumulation distribution line is actually looking very promising. You are seeing a much higher high here, meaning there are definitively buyers that have stepped up. So there is something happening here underneath, which is not yet reflected here in the price, and what is happening here is quite bullish. The RSI is in basically the neutral zone, more or less moving along with the data, with the price. Okay, so let's look here at the daily data points. Okay, so you do have a 49% positive correlation with S&P 500. You know, it's basically like, well, not in the neutral zone, but so there is a positive correlation, but it's not something you can make like a huge deal out of. Interesting, when you look at here at the moving averages, let's load it. So we have been above the 200-day moving average, like here and here. You see that at previous times we did break out above it. It was a very good sign. Some really big moves happened to the bullish side. So if you measure this, all the way to this high here was actually 158-ish%. Since the breakout here, we saw, you know, a 56-ish% gain. We recently have another breakout. I mean, of course, there's no guarantee that something similar will happen, but based on the history, we have seen major rallies being triggered before. But just like this and this, where we saw a major pullback, if you are going to have, you know, if you go bullish and then you have a nice gain, then you consider protecting it, because there's a big difference between having, you know, a 157% gain and a 19% gain. That's a pretty darn huge difference. So let the trend be your friend, as always. Now looking at RSI here, it is interesting to see that EOS, it doesn't like really to be deeply oversold or overbought. So that's another thing to be aware of. We have recently been overbought, but then we had a very quick pullback. That's one of those, you know, indicators you can use for market timing, given that it has historically been quite reliable. When it comes to the RSI, it is not, you know, I mean, the thing is that being overbought it is considered to be a bullish sign. However, it can also be interpreted as being, you know, a risk sign for the bulls. So there's two ways to interpret both overbought situation and also oversold situations. And which is why it's very important to look at it in context. So what is the psychology of the security? In this instance, we can see that with all the history here of EOS, overbought more often than not actually does trigger a pullback. While in other securities, you can see that the security is overbought for a long time and it keeps just making new highs, or, you know, rallying with, you know, a few pullbacks every now and then. So you just look at the context of that, the history, basically. Okay, so that was EOS. Very interesting security. The cryptocurrency market is something I do like, but the big problem I have is that they were supposed to challenge, you know, fiat currency to actually, you know, be used in commerce, and that's something we simply haven't seen to any like meaningful extent, and that's very disappointing because it reveals quite clearly that people are not, well, the majority of participants in the crypto space are using it to speculate. They're not using it to actually challenge fiat, which kind of was the entire point. When Bitcoin was developed, it was to be an alternative to the fiat currency system, and in order to be that, you actually need to use it in commerce. But that might change in the future. Okay, so now we have the chart frenzy around. So in this video, let's look at some other cryptocurrencies. So let's look at Bitcoin like this. The Bitcoin / US dollar. A major rally here. A very impressive move. This week was really strong. We are heading into some resistance levels, so it's very important here for the bulls to actually show some follow through. Let's look at Cardano US dollar. Okay, so with the Cardano here, we are seeing a very nice rounding bottom formation. Sure, quite a few gains have already been made with Cardano. This gain here is 446%. Hence, I mean, you would be a kind of a bit later entrant into this party, but rounding bottom formations, they are usually more, especially of this length, it is expected that it will continue. Though, given that the history here of Cardano is to have these pullbacks every now and then, it makes sense to expect at least some kind of pullback before another, push, significant push higher. But that is just based on this history, of course. So let's look at some others. Let's see if we can see here Ethereum, like this dollar. Pretty similar pattern to what we saw with Cardano. A breakout above some key moving average resistance levels. Have a bit of a... We don't have this very clear... Well, it is a rounding-ish bottom here as well, actually. A breakout above the mini horizontal resistance levels. So this looks good for Ethereum. Well, yeah, let's look at some others. Let's look at some stocks. So let's look at actually CCL, Carnival Corporation. So this is one of the cruise line stocks. Of course, the cruise lines have been hit very severely with the whole contagion situation, big time, and we are seeing that even though there was a nice bounce here, this is a lesson, in trading, and why market timing and protecting your gains is important, because this rally here was 204%. That's a good gain. But if you did not, use stop levels, you would, instead of having 204% gain, you would now be looking at, 66-ish. That's a pretty darn huge difference. It is, troubling to see that the bears have been so aggressive, because the big question here about the cruise line industry is it even possible to have this in the post-pandemic economy? And it's kind of hard to really make that call. I would now start to shift more in the more significantly bearish direction, because the big problem with the cruise line is that you are in a very enclosed space. Okay, you are literally in this floating device out there on the ocean. It is the polar opposite of social distancing. A bunch of people in a very enclosed space. You want to have people in close proximity on a cruise ship due to the economics of how they are operated. So it's a very difficult situation. And actually in Norway we have these... we do of course have cruise lines, but we also have these smaller cruise line-ish ships that go between key places in Norway. It's called Hurtigruten. Speedy route is the direct English translation, approximately. And basically what happened is that there's been a major pandemic outbreak on one of those cruise lines. So there's been a big significant lockdown of that business in Norway, and that just shows you how extremely fragile that industry is. So it can very quickly go from business looking really good to like literally complete shutdown overnight, and that's risky, and that's very difficult for investors to handle. Hence, it is very understandable that investors are like, maybe I have way better things to invest in. Okay, whatever you do, of course, don't fight the trend, and may the trend be with you.